Hello everyone and welcome. My name is Jennifer Long from Sew a Story, and I am so excited to be here to share a deep passion of mine with you today. It is doll making, but doll making made easy in a panel form. So I'm so happy to be here. We're going to talk about this panel. This is Boris the Cow panel, and it is a cotton panel with Country Life fabric collection with Riley Blake Designs, but any of the doll panels that we do with Riley Blake Designs will follow these tips and tricks. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you secret tips and tricks for modern ragdoll making that before have been only shared in memberships and in different kinds of closed doors. So I'm so excited to share these tips with you to get a professional doll that you can make in just a panel, so just two pieces put together, and I'm going to give you all of the secrets of this trade. So I just want to go through what you're going to get from this panel. So this is the full panel right here. And on this panel, we have everything that you need to make Boris the Cow. So this is Boris the Cow here. He has working pockets here. He has a little tail. He has ears, optional horns, and he even has a fully lined cowboy hat. So we're going to learn how to make him with his cowboy boots on. And then he has all of his friends. He has a little dog. And beside that, he has a tractor. Every farm needs a good tractor. And then he has a little sheep. And I want you to be creative. We're just going to learn how to make Boris the Cow today, but you'll use the same techniques that you learned from Boris the Cow for all of his friends here, all of these stuffies. And so I want you to feel comfortable to be creative and show, these are just French knots that I did to give this sheep some texture. Of course, Boris needs a bandana. So here's his bandana that he's going to wear. This is a storage bag for all of these items, but it also goes as a dog food bag for his little friends. And then there's just optional little elements here. There's some beets for the garden, and there's flowers if you want to put a flower in your cow's hair or maybe make him into a sheriff. He can do all of those things. So I'm so excited to get started. I'm going to share a supply list with you so you can make sure you're fully prepared before we begin working together today. Are you ready to see how easy it is to make Boris the doll with me? Let's get started. So first we're going to cut out all of our pieces. So if you haven't already, you can press your cotton panel. It always helps. Here's one of those tips and tricks I promised you. It always helps to use a little bit of starch. I use Best Press on my panel before I cut it out, and it just helps the cotton from pulling or changing in any way, shape, or form. So I would just give it a little bit of a spray, press it nice and flat, lay it out, and you're going to cut it out on the second line. So as you can see, there's two seam allowances here, and this again is a tip and trick that I want to share with you for sewing with children. So if you want an easier sew without really tiny limbs, then you can stitch right on this first 1/4 inch seam allowance, and he'll just have a little brown outer line around him. But if you really want all the seams matched and everything else, you can have this full 1/2 inch seam allowance and sew right on the inside. We'll talk about that a little bit further, but for now, please always cut on the outer seam allowance. Once you have all your pieces cut out, we're ready to begin. You're going to take your tail piece, and as you can see, I'm going to keep referring back to my doll here that's already made. This is his tail. We have it coming out of his side. You are welcome to put it coming out wherever you want, but we have it coming out of the side because it is a 2-dimensional panel, and it really is just adorable and cute. We're going to add a little bit of fringe to it. So you just take that panel and you put it off to the side, and I would like to add a little bit of fringe. I'm using Lori Holt's chunky thread. This is the cloud color, and I'm just going to take it and wrap it around my fingers. Don't worry, because we can trim this together. So I'm going to wrap it around my fingers, and I'm just going to go, let's say, 20 times. Tell me, are you counting? Once you've got it about 20 times, you can just pull it off, and you've got this hoop. Don't worry about it being even at the bottom, because we're going to fix that. So I'm going to tighten it at the top just like you would on a ponytail. I've got it there. And if you want to grab a little piece of Scotch tape, this will be in the seam allowance and it'll be cut away. So not to worry about that at all. Make it nice and tight and wrap it around so it looks just like this. All right, then we're going to take our tail and I'm going to fold it in half directly. I'm going to bring it over to my pressing board so you can see. So over here, I'm going to fold it directly in half and I'm going to press it so that I know exactly where that half line mark is. Great. And then I'm going to open it back up again so I can see exactly where that half line is. Because it's going to turn inside out, you have to be thinking about things being on the inside, so when you turn it out, it's on the outside. So the fringe part is actually going to lay on the inside of the tail, and then I'm going to flip this over. Now, really important that you don't want to catch all of that fringe in there. So that's why I had you roll it and it's tight. We can play with it and design it afterwards, hairstyle it afterwards, but I'm going to pin those two seam allowances here and just make sure that we're not catching any of that fringe that's inside, and pin it all the way around, all the way down. So it's going to look a lot like this, and you're going to sew along that straight line. I have one made here already. So it's been like this. Once it's there, we'll turn it out. I'm going to teach you how to turn things out, but it'll look a lot like this. We'll just set that aside, and that's the tail. We're going to make all of his parts and pieces before we begin with the actual assembly of the doll, and you're going to see how easy it is to make the doll itself. So next you're going to take 2 ears. There should be 4 ear pieces in total, and one should be a pink ear, and then there should be the back of the ear, and same thing with the other side. You're going to flip them together and match the seam allowances, and then with your pins you're going to just pin along where the seam is. There is kind of a flat edge, and that piece you're going to leave open. I've taken another one here, and then you can see that it's left open here. I've sewn around the side and I've left it here. Let me bring this one over and we're going to show you how to turn this one and how to make sure all the positions are nice and smooth, all the seams. Okay, so here it is. I've sewn all the way around, and I'm just going to make little tiny snips in that seam allowance, being very, very careful that I don't go into my thread, because I want my thread to be nice and strong, but I don't want it to pull on the shape, especially around the tip of the ear. I want to make sure that I have lots of little cuts. This is going to give you a nice rounded shape and a really flat shape. So once I've got that all done, we're going to use a special tool that we use in doll making. So you don't have to use this tool. You can have a point turner, you can use a chopstick. There's lots of different tools you can use, but this tool is called a hemostat, and it's something that we use in doll making quite a bit. It has a lot of purposes, and this is one of them. So it makes turning things really, really easy. This is a small hole, so I'm going to stick the points into the hole just like this. Then I open up the hemostats and I push my little finger there, and it's going to clip and grab. I'm going to click it here, and it's got a hold of that. All I have to simply do is just pull it off. It's like magic. And there is one ear. When I release, the ear comes out. There's no harm done to the fabric, and it's ready to go. I'm going to take the points again. Again, you can use a point turner, but I'm just going to open it up and get all the edges nice and smooth. So there's a professional cow ear, and we're going to come back over to the pressing mat and just press it nice and flat. Good. I've already made the other ear, so now we have 2 ears. So I'm going to set those off aside. So I have a tail and 2 ears. If you're opting to make the horns, you can make them now in the same way by pulling them over and just sewing around the edges, leaving that opening open. I've made that on this cow option, so you can see I have these horns here, but on this one I'm going to opt not to have those. So we'll just have that on the one cow. And the final touch Are you ready? So we're all about play and having fun. And so we want to take this panel and give it a really 3D effect. So we are going to take our cow panel and we are going to actually give him working pockets. One at the front, maybe he wants to hold a piece of wheat in here. And of course, he needs pockets at the back. So maybe he's just going to relax after a hard day harvesting the field, and he's just going to cross his legs. And you can just see that it's working pockets. So there's lots of fun to be had with the pockets, and they're fun and easy to make. So let's go ahead and make one of them. So again, you're going to take your pocket and you're going to cut it out on the seam allowance. You're going to take this pocket and fold it in half, and using your iron, you're going to press. All right, so it's pressed here. I have one pressed here already, and it's pinned. Then you're going to take your sewing machine, and you're going to stitch 1/4 inch all the way around, except you're going to leave that turning space. So same thing like you've done with the ears and the tail and the horns, you're going to leave a space for turning on the top corner. I've sewn one here, and I've left this corner open. So let's come over back to the mat, and I'll show you how to turn this little piece. So here it is all the way sewn. Before I turn, do you remember what we need to do? We need to clip all these corners all the way around. You can even cut off some of the corners on the very pointed spots. And we're going to come all the way around and just make sure it's cut. Good. On the straight edges, you don't need to make snips. Then using the same technique as we have already shown, we've put those hemostats inside or your point turner. I'm going to clip them and turn that pocket inside out. And then I'm going to use a point turner. Oops, he wants to get away from me. And then we're going to push here along the pocket all the way down. So look at that cute little tractor on the cute little pocket. That is going to mimic the tractor on the front of the cow doll panel, the one that we've shown you here, and the one that you can see on the front of the panel. I'm going to show you this in a minute here, how to attach everything. But first we're going to tuck this in and press. I already have one pressed here, so we're just going to put it off to the side, and we have our supplies ready to go. Now comes the fun part. Now we get to build Boris the Cow doll and put all of these elements onto him with ease. Before you begin, this is another secret tip and trick that I want to share with you. I've done this in pen just so that it's really easy for you to see here, but you can take this on a light box or a window and just trace right against Boris the Cow. So where you're going to be sewing, that's where you trace. If you're choosing to sew on the second seam allowance, so the 1/4 inch seam allowance halfway through, so he's a little bit wider, the brown one, you're welcome to trace there, but this way it just makes it very easy for matching. So I've traced the entire cow panel like this. I'm going to flip him over and put him on my workspace so that he is ready to go. We're going to assemble everything onto the front of our cow. So let's start from the top and work our way down to the bottom. If you have horns, now is the time to place them on him. And, oh yeah, here they are. So we'll just pretend I had horns. They're going to go on the inside of Boris this way. Now, because his head is in a round shape, if you can see that these pieces actually have a little bit of an angle on them, and that is to mimic the shape of his head. If you put them like this, when you lift him up, it'll actually end up with his horns sideways because of the shape of his head. So this way, when they're on a slight angle and his head is curved, and you sew them together, or sew the pieces together, they will actually end up straight, coming out, just like you can see here. So I'll lay those just so you know where the placement of them would be, if you're opting for them. Next, we'll take the ears. And we want, if you can imagine, we want the pinks of the ears facing the front, just like this. So if you imagine, that's how it's going to be. So you're actually going to do, we're going to call this inside of the ear, is going to face his face. And it's going to cover his eyes so he can't see right now. So you're going to cover his eyes and put the ears over his face, just like so. I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to pin these things in place. Since I'm not sewing these today, I'm going to move them. I just wanted you to know for placement, but I'm going to pin these ears in place so they don't move. And then we're going to talk about tacking everything down. Good. It's kind of like a little bit of peekaboo, right? Okay, so those are his ears. The next thing we're going to put on him is this pocket. So I'm going to take this pocket on the front and I'm going to mimic this space exactly and lay it on right in the front, and I'm going to pin it here. When you sew this on, you're going to keep that opening top, but we're going to talk about sewing in a second. Let's just get everything in its right place. And the last thing that we're going to add to him is the tail. So a few things to think about. If you want him to be exactly like the sample that I'm showing you here, then the tail will be on his right side, my left facing side. But you can put it on either side, like I said before, but just if you're looking for this sample. You don't want it to come straight out of his hip, because when he opens up, then it's going to point directly out. You can see that this is on a bit of a diagonal when it's pointing, which means I angled it just like I did on the ears over here. You can play with the length of this tail by just simply going in or out. So we'll just guess about there, and I'll place a pin here. Okay, then you would take this to your sewing machine and you would sew in the seam allowances for these pieces. So you're going to take, depending on which seam allowance you're using, or if you're using neither of them, then you can go right, doesn't matter which one. But you're going to go right inside the seam allowance and stitch just to tack down there, stitch to tack down, stitch to tack down, and then finally you're going to stitch along both sides and down on the bottom of the pocket to keep it in place. You'll repeat that step on the back panel for both seat pockets, and you're going to put both seat pockets here and sew all the way down and around on both sides. So you have 2 pockets on the back, and he's ready to go. I want to talk to you right now about how to get perfect alignment and how we are going to get him assembled into an actual doll shape. Okay. So what we need to do is make sure that nothing that we don't want caught in the seam isn't in the seam allowance. So we want these in the seam allowance, so that's perfect. We want this in the seam allowance. We don't want pockets, so those are stitched down, and we don't want this fringe to accidentally get caught. So a tip and trick here would be to keep it in the middle of his body. You can use a piece of tape again, and just place it over on the middle, making sure that nothing is catching in that seam allowance, and he's just tacked down. When we turn him out, we'll remove that tape and he'll be just great to go. Okay, so now we go. Now he is ready for assembly. We are going to take this back, and because we drew on the front piece, that's the piece we're going to flip over on top, and we're just going to sandwich him together. This is when the magic happens. Okay. So the pieces will line up exactly, and especially if you did use that tip about starching your fabric so it didn't get stretched out when you were pressing it, then the pieces will line up exactly. You can see where my line is, and now don't be afraid, but these will be your friend. The more pins you can use now, the happier you will be in your sewing process. You're going to take your time with this last step. It is your finishing step of the doll making, and you just cannot use too many pins. So I'm going to start at the neck seam at the point here. I'm going to push this needle right through the point, and then I'm going to flip the cow back, and I'm going to find the matching point here and simply place it in place. I'm going to continue to do that all the way along, and I want to show you how close I am going to pin. Again, it might seem like a step that you want to rush through, but I would highly, highly, highly suggest that you don't rush through this step. You really take your time, because you've done so much work already on preparing him that you want the last seams to all match up. So you're just going to continue to go around all the way. So you're going to continue to go around all the way. Same thing at the hands. A couple things that I might try to line up if I know that they are. So I'm going to just call out a couple of points here for you. So he has these overalls, and you can see how they are matching right at the neck and right at the arm shoulders here. If you want that to happen, you have to just pin that first as you're going around. So I'm going to take the corner of his overall and the corner of his overall and just give it another pin. And I will even do it on the second side of that same overall, there and there. And you're going to just have excellent points for that. Then I will look at his arm and do the next matching point. He has a cuff here on both sides. So I'll do that at least on one side of the cuff. And then I'll go back and fill in with a couple of pins, maybe one or two here. So again, you can't have too many pins. Then I would keep this process going. I would pin around his hand, around the wrist, and then the next really important spot is that armpit. So I am going to pin inside his armpit and then just peek inside and then make sure I catch the point. The next important spot would be this spot of his hips. You can see that how it's matching right here. So I want to make sure that that point is matching. I'm going to do the same thing, the same technique. This same technique is going to go through all the way from his clothing. It's going to follow at the bottom of his hip all the way to his boots. You want the corners of his boots to match. So we're going to make sure on the insides and the outsides. So you're going to make sure you do all the points there. Once he is fully pinned, you need to make a decision on where the opening will be that you're going to turn him from. I personally highly recommend that you leave a spot from a little bit under the armpit to a little bit at the top of the hip here, so that you have a nice big opening on the side, but it's not going to change any of the alignments that you want there. So you're going to leave that opening there. Take it to your machine and you're going to simply sew. But here's another tip and trick that you might not find anywhere else. This line that you drew earlier, this is where it's going to come in really, really handy. You're going to sew not just on that line, but slightly, ever so slightly, one needle on the inside of that line. So if the line is here, just think of sewing one needle on the inside, and then you won't have any extra seam allowance showing through if your doll. If that is important to you, just make sure that you're just one tiny inch. Shorten your seam length, or your stitch length, pardon me. Shorten your stitch length and go very slow. I also like to put my machine in a needle down position, and that way when my needle is down, I can rotate the fabric and keep it going nice and smoothly all the way around. I have one Boris already made and sewn. Here you can see that I've left the opening on this side this time, right here. Otherwise, everything is sewn. I started to trim some of that seam allowance and that bulk out, and I'm just going to continue to do that and show you how I do that. So this was the double seam allowance that we had. I'm just going to take, now that I know that I was able to catch everything, I'm just going to go around and continue to trim all the way around this doll. The only place that I might want to leave it a little bit bigger, which is totally fine, is that place that I'm going to keep it open. So this place I'm going to keep open because I want to have lots to turn under when I'm hand sewing it shut. I might just keep that there. I'm going to keep cutting around it. So I'm going to cut right in all the way up, and then I'm going to show you how to keep all of these corners nice and pointy as you turn this panel doll inside out, or right side out. So we're going to take, there we go, all of these pieces away. So I'm back to a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to start to do some little snips around each of these parts on the doll, especially in the corners. You don't have to worry about the straightaways too much, but anything that is curved needs lots of snips. And definitely, I might even notch out where it's a point like this. So I'll show you what I mean. Being careful not to go into your stitch line. I'm going to pull that notch out just like that. And same thing on this side. I'm going to pull this notch out just like this. Good. And I'm going to go around the whole doll and just do little snips on all the curves. So this is a really, really fun way to just check your seam allowance as well. Check that your stitch is actually inside where you wanted it to go. And then just make sure that everything's good. Once you turn your doll right side out, you can always turn him back inside out and fix anything. But, you know, sometimes it's just, you don't want to do that too many times. It doesn't feel great. So I'm going to notch this out here again. So it's just a great time to I use this time to check every stitch and just make sure that it's exactly where I wanted it to be. If I need to fix anything, I just take it over to my machine now and I do that. So this hips right here on the tops of both legs, inside this armpit, there's going to be a lot of extra bulk. So let's notch that out as well. We're also going to notch out at the neck. This can stay as a straightaway, but at the wrist here, we're going to definitely make sure it's going around, that we're notching. Good. Okay, so the neck. Let's take a little bit of a notch here on the lower part of the neck where the shoulder strap is, and even one more at the top part of the neck. And then you won't have puckering happen. So you can see how nice and smooth this is. That's what we're aiming for. Okay, we want a nice rounded head shape. So again, let's go all the way around. The more snips you can do, then the more curve your fabric will get. Again, this is all just with your cotton panel. All right, let's repeat what we did on the other side to this neck. Taking our time and just being careful that we don't cut our seams. So here I will not notch out because this is my opening that I'm leaving. So I'm going to leave that the same, but as soon as my opening stops and I've started the stitching again, that's where I'm going to start clipping. And I'll do my notch. And there, I think we're ready. Okay, here we go. This is going to be the part, this is the most rewarding part of doll making, I think, because it's the time when all of your work has been revealed to you. So it's like seeing the quilt block come together or seeing the project that you have come alive. Well, we're about to turn a piece of fabric into a cow doll. So we're going to start by taking those hemostats again, and we're going to turn right side out the limbs to start. I'm going to put it in the furthest one from me first. So this furthest leg, and I am just going to do the same technique that I've been using, catch it and pull it inside of itself. So this leg can just stay inside of Boris the cow right now. Then we're going to take the second leg and do the same thing and just pull it inside. So super easy. Then I'm going to take the arm that's the furthest from me and do that. So catch and pull just till it's right side out, and then do the second arm, keeping those hemostats in there, catch it, click and pull. Okay, he's getting kind of crunchy. Now we're going to take the top of his head and pull everything through that opening. So there we go. Are you ready? I feel like we almost need a drum roll here now. Okay, here he comes. His arms, his legs. So there he is. He doesn't quite look the same yet, but do not worry. That is just fine. That's when we take our point turner and we're going to just open everything up. He's about to come alive, so just bear with us. We're almost there. Push out on all of your seams. And if you made those nice corner clips, you're going to have a nice sharp corner there. Same thing with the other leg. You're going to push the other leg out. This is a great time to check before you stuff. You can look at your boots and say, oh yeah, that's fantastic, that point there. Excellent. And you're going to keep going through everything. If you want to fix anything, feel free to turn it back right side out. This is the time to do it, or inside out. This is the time to do it. There's one arm. Here's the other arm. And then through the head. So I'm going to start at the top and just go around the whole part of his head. Now this sample I made without ears, just so I could really show you here how everything was going. I just wanted to show you the techniques, but this is what it's going to look like before we stuff. So it's getting a lot closer, right? Yes. Okay, so let's clear off our space. We won't need any more of, I'll put my garbage away, and we're gonna get started at stuffing. Now, I know I keep saying this part is my next favorite part, but this part is my favorite part because it really brings this stuffed toy to life. So you're going to be surprised how much you actually need. I'm going to pull this closer towards me just here. So I'm just using polyester fiber fill. You can get it at any craft store, and we're going to take it in little pieces. To prevent your doll from getting clumpy and having a lot of stuffing in one area and not very much in others, you're going to want to stuff it really carefully and evenly, and I'm going to show you how to do that. And one thing that you want to think of is you want to stuff it more than you actually think that you need to, because this will settle. And especially if it gets hand washed, and we know it's going to get loved. So as soon as it starts to get loved and handled and washed, if it isn't stuffed very well, then the stuffing will start to settle, and you'll start to just see a little bit more of a rag appearance, which is also still endearing. But if you want it to hold its shape for longer, here's what you need to do. You're going to take the stuffing in smaller chunks. So I'm going to take a little bit at a time and separate it open. I'm going to put the hemostats on there, and I'm going to start again with the same technique that I did for turning. I'm going to push it into the leg furthest from me, and I'm going to push it all the way down to the toe. Push it down to the toe and give it a nice rounded shape. So that first piece of stuffing is almost your most important because it's establishing the shape of that boot. And I'm going to continue on with that technique and just go all the way to the leg. So there's a second bit, and I'm going to push it into there, push, 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 and we're going to keep going. We're going to see how much stuffing we need just for one Boris the Cow leg. Good. I use my fingers here to kind of help shape it to make sure that it's going in smoothly too. So just have fun with it. There's no right or wrong when you're stuffing a panel. And do not stress either. These toys are meant to be sewn with love. And one thing that made me become a doll designer and a doll maker was that I wanted to make homemade toys for my children when they were very young. And I wanted to make them with toys that were soft and that were also something that they could look at and not feel like they were just, a body image that they couldn't achieve. So I started making dolls for my own kids for those reasons. And the amazing thing that I found was that the dolls that I was making for my kids, whether they were beautiful or not, or they had lots of imperfections, my children loved them more than toys we could buy at a store. And it was almost life-changing for me, as I am trained as an early childhood educator. So it was so pivotal of that moment for me when they treated those dolls and these toys with such care and respect, because they knew, they can sense, even at such a very young age, how they were made with love and how they were homemade. So do not ever, ever, ever criticize yourself for making a doll not in a way that you think it should be, because your child will love this doll unconditionally and will know the love that you have put into it to create it. So just enjoy the process and really share that moment with them, that special time. Okay. So I've just almost finished putting the last little bit of stuffing. I continued the same process through all the arms, through the top of the head, and now I'm just finishing with the center of the body. Just so you can get an idea, you can see how firm the head is here when I squeeze it. And then the stomach is a little bit more soft. So you can play with some of the density that you want in your doll. I'm going to turn this side over. We're going to just learn how to stitch this up so it's nice and invisible and matching. I already have my thread threaded, and it's double threaded and knotted, and we're going to do a ladder stitch. Because I have a point here that I'm going to try and match, I'm going to start at the closest point to that, which is the top, and work my way down. I'm going to take my needle from the inside and back into that seam far enough up that I have lots of room, and I'm going to just lift up his arm and try and get in here. I might have to move a few things so you can see me okay. I'm going to try and get in here, and I'm going to do just along the side a tiny little, oh, it caught on his other arm. Wow, he's trying to help me so much. Okay, I'm going to pull it just a nice even stitch on one side of the seam. Then I'm going to go straight across like a ladder rung and do the next one coming down, continuing down from there. So I'm going to go straight along, and that's going to pull it in together. So once I pull that, I'm going to show you how that looks. There's just a bit of stuffing in there. It's going to pull, and it's going to make that stitch invisible. Then you're going to continue on one side and back and forth all the way along that opening. So you're going to go ladder across and then straight along where you want that seam to go. And then when you pull it all, it closes up that seam. I'm going to continue on down, trying to get that corner to match. Oh, now he's really helping me again. I'm just going to lay him flatter on the table to do this. Good. All right, once you get to the end, you're going to knot it. So just go back where you came from, and you can put that needle right through that hoop and pull it. I usually like to do it twice just for a little bit of extra protection. One thing you can do if this is going to be really used and not a shelf sitter is you can go back up again and do another just extra seam. But if that's just good for you right now, then you can take that right where you ended and put it as far through his body as you can. It's going to pop out as far as it can. Pull it through, and then you're going to give that thread a cut so that the tail of the thread is actually embedded inside of the doll, and it won't come loose. And there you have it. Thank you so much for being here with me today. We have made successfully the full cotton cow, Boris the Cow doll panel. Is a cotton panel with Riley Blake's designs. The techniques you learned today with me here can be applied to any of the cotton stuffed panels that we will provide to you at Riley Blake Designs. And the techniques you learned here, you can apply to the rest of the elements that you find on this panel. So I hope you enjoyed sharing this experience with me. It was wonderful to spend this time together, and you can find more about me on my website. We'll put a link in the description. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great day.